If I had to give some words to describe Janna, they would be like passive, reactive, disengaged, supportive. And I think the difference between a good Janna and a bad Janna is probably how like clean they are. And I think this is pretty well accepted among people who understand Janna that this is how it is. But recently someone posted on the Janna subreddit, and I'm still not sure if they were trolling or actually thought this, but they thought it was better to play Janna like aggressively and proactively. Like the core of their build and their playstyle was like building righteous glory and flashing behind the enemy team to hold them in. And predictably, this guy has like 22 Janna games total, season 6 and season 7, and is Diamond 5. And there's no actual reasons for this other than just like, this is how you lead your team super fast to victory using, Janna's abilities to initiate! Exclamation mark. And so, like, trying to explain things to him was pretty pointless. Like, he might actually have been trolling. I don't know. But what's interesting is I found myself going over like the theory behind why Janna plays the way she does, which I've never really done before. Because, like I said, I have this description of how Janna plays, but I've not really ever thought about like why she plays that way. So that's what this is going to be, like an explanation of why Janna's design makes her playstyle so like passive, reactive, disengaged, supportive, all that stuff. All right, so the tricky part about this is looking at her kit as a whole, because when we look at a champ's individual skills, they can be used different ways depending on the overall kit. But like, yeah, we have to start somewhere. So I'm gonna start with Janna's Q. And two important things about her Q are that it moves really slowly and potentially has a charge time. And what this means is it's much more often possible to hit your Q on someone if they're moving towards you than if they're moving away from you. Like, even without the charge time, the slow travel speed makes it so that the enemy champion's movement is a big factor in whether it hits or not. And if they're moving towards you, that effectively works for you, whereas if they're moving away from you, it works against you. And you can even express the time it takes for a Q to hit in terms of the enemy champ's like velocity and how far they are away from you when you cast it. And obviously, if the time is longer than the Q lasts, it won't hit. And just note that, if the enemy is moving towards you, that makes the distance you can hit Q at longer, whereas if they're moving away from you, that makes the distance you can hit Q at shorter. And also, Q is really wide, so people generally can't juke to the left or right. So, like, whether or not can hit people depends on if they're moving towards you or away from you, because the Q itself travels so slow. And also remember that it has a potential charge time, and like even if you don't normally use the charge time, when you do, it'll just add to how you can hit Q on enemies going towards you but not going away from you. So Q is an ability that like briefly knocks up enemies moving towards you, making it ideal for disengage. And just because the fact that you generally don't have an opportunity to use it unless people dash in on you, it's a like reactive rather than proactive ability. So, this naturally leads into the one where I think Janna actually should be played proactively, somewhat at least. Like, remember that when your enemy is running away from you, their movement speed works against the possibility of hitting Q. So, since you have a slow in your kit on W, like naturally, if you're going to want to hit Q, someone is running away from you, well, then you should slow them with W first to make it possible to hit your Q. So, maybe it is possible to engage a fight, but like walking up to somebody and pressing W isn't exactly like reliable engage. And also the fact like the rest of the kit makes you sort of supportive and disengage focused. So her passive is in a pretty similar like situation where it makes enemies move towards you faster, and like if the rest of her kit lend itself to engage and like you were ahead of your team, so like then your passive would help like move your team towards the enemy, then it would also help engage. But since the rest of your kit makes you typically in the back of your team, your passive just helps people run away faster. And so then let's look at ENR, because these are really like critical abilities. And at first it might look like, okay, it's a shield. The shield is like just a shield. It doesn't really lend itself to disengage or engage or whatever. But first of all, for you to use shield efficiently, it has to either be used in a situation where it's like guaranteed to be needed or reactively, because if you waste it, they can just not hit the shield and wait until it goes away. So it is a reactive ability. But I mean, still, it seems like it's not necessarily supportive, right? You can use it on anybody. But actually, I mean, the shield is more of a multiplier. So, in terms of effective health, if you use it on an ally with more armor and magic resist, it gives them more effective health. And in terms of actually being effective with the health you give to someone, if you give it to someone who can use it better, they get more out of it. And like just in terms of damage, if you give it to someone with better AD ratios, they get more out of the AD. So just because other champs have, better kits for using shield, ideally, you're shielding other people. And now onto your ult. So this is where it all sort of comes together. And remember that we have to look at the kit as a whole. And with that in mind, let's think about how ult knocks people away from you. So naturally something that pushes people away from you is a disengage-ability. Literally, moving people away from you is the definition of disengage. But there is a potential for a knockback to be used for engage. Lee Sin's ult is often used to engage. So, we need to establish that it's not ideal to use a Janna ult like a Lee Sin ult. And this is where the rest of your kit comes in to play. So, Lee Sin has 2 really good gap closers in his kit with his Q and W. So it's actually viable for Lee to get behind people. And also know that Lee's ult does significant damage, so it's used on the enemy you want to kill, and that's good. But compare that to Janna's ult, which has a significant heal, so you want to be using it next to your allies who you want to keep alive. So not only does the ult have a knockback, it's also best used with your team to push enemies away and heal your team, whereas trying to use it to push enemies into your team isn't really viable. So just, all in all, Q is good for when people are coming towards you. W actually can be used defensively for chasing people, but the slow works just as well for peeling people too. E is best used on other people, especially marksmen, and using R to keep your team alive is just more efficient than using it for engage. And I mean, of course, since you're in the back, your passive is used for kiting and not engaging. So you might not like playing defensively, but you have to recognize that it's what Janna's kit is tailored for.